thanks so much for making the time to talk to me today. And there's been a lot going on. It's been, the wonders of technology that we've had a chance, to have a few chats and get to know each other this way. It's really great. And I'm coming out to San Francisco and LA later this year, so we'll get to meet in person, which I'm really looking forward to. And today I wondered if, this is for my series that I'm doing, this series I'm doing, so I don't know, it sounds awfully grand, but it's called Talking About Childlessness. And it's just a chance to have conversations with all kinds of women around the world who are childless, not necessarily by choice, or sometimes not always obviously by choice, if you know what I mean, but also who are kind of, living that life and are open to talking about it. Because it's such a taboo topic, and your work is also with Quirky alone and the book that you're writing, you feel like a fellow sister flying the flag for kind of, let's talk about all those things we're not supposed to talk about. So if you're okay with kind of talking a little bit about how you came to be a woman without children, just as much as you're comfortable with, it would be really helpful.
Yeah, I would love to. Well, first, it's been really amazing to connect with you because Gateway Women and Quirky alone feel like such incredible kindred spirits. So then it's very natural that you and I would feel like kindred spirits. So it's already been super enriching for me, and I know for my Quirky alone audience, it's going to be really enriching to learn about Gateway Women, and hopefully vice versa. So it feels like we're kind of creating a league here to support each other. So I love that. So then, how did I come to be childless? Really, was the question, right?
Yeah.
And how do I feel about that? So, I have mostly been well known for writing about being single because most of my life I have been single. I have had boyfriends and relationships, but my sort of default state for most of my teenagehood and 20s and 30s was being single, always wanting to be with someone, but also being selective and having other priorities in my life too. And so and that's what the Quirky alone concept has been about, is validating that existence, really. And then what comes along with that is having children, right?
Yeah.
Because, of course, I could have been a kind of woman who decided I'm going to have a child no matter what, and, gone the route of, well, for one, I had a friend who is a very close friend of mine, and at one point we talked about having a child together if I didn't meet the man. He's gay, and, in a certain way it would have been really beautiful because we have a really incredible friendship, and I'm sure we would have a beautiful baby together. And there were moments when I had that vision and I thought, yes, I haven't met the man, I'll have a baby with Chris. But in the end, after so much reflection about this, I just had to admit to myself that it was mostly a fantasy and not really something that I was putting first in my life. I wasn't putting it first to be with a man just to have a child.
Yeah.
And to be totally honest, there are women who do that, and there's nothing wrong with it because they really want to have a child. So it's more important to them to have a child than it is to be with the right partner. For me, being with the right partner was more important than having a child. And then when I was about 35, I went through this sort of dark period of my life when I think, from my coaching practice, I also noticed that that's a really difficult time to be single because you feel a ton of pressure about the biological clock and losing your attractiveness. And so I was sort of going through this low time when I thought, well, what if I don't have a child? Maybe I'm just going to be bored for the rest of my life because, everyone says like that's what gives your life meaning. And, then you experience growing up with them. And like, maybe I'm just going to be like have a really empty life if I don't do that and run out of things to be interested in. I literally felt that way. And what I wound up doing was just quitting my job and going traveling alone for a year in South America. And what that did for me was made me realize that I'm really infinitely curious about the world, and I won't be bored, and that there are a lot of other ways to create meaning in my life.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like a direct path to that conclusion. It had a lot of self-doubt, and you know, it still can be hard, because I basically have been ambivalent. You know, I was never that person who said, no, I don't want to have children, or yes, I definitely want to have children. It's just that it just didn't happen, and at the end of the day, it's sort of like, well, I guess that wasn't what was supposed to happen.
I think, I mean, thanks for being so honest and for bringing up that word ambivalent, because that's a taboo within the taboo as well. This idea that, you know, there's only one kind of woman, which is, you know, who kind of knows absolutely that she wants to have children, and that every other kind of woman is a bit weird, you know, because either you really know, or you really know, you know, you either really want them or you really don't want them, you know, as if any decision is ever, you know, really that simple. But also this idea that there's something kind of unvalidating for you as a woman if you're not completely clear about it, that, you know, it's a sort of, you should be clear. I love that should word, because it always comes with one of those. And I think that, you know, ambivalence in my book, I called ambivalence compassion, curiosity, and intelligence in action, because it's a thoughtfulness, you know. And actually, I think the world would be a better place if people were more thoughtful about whether becoming a parent is really right for them. I think there would be a lot less unhappy people and neglected children and harassed, you know, unprepared parents. I think people need to be thinking about it more, rather than this idea that thinking about it is in some way slightly suspect. Because in a way, we've never, our generation, I mean, I'm a bit older than you. I'm going to be, I'm entering my crone years, which is wonderful because I'm in my 50s. So I'll be 52 this year. I think you're a decade younger than me. I mean, you know, we were the first generation my age who had the opportunity to actually make this decision. You know, after, you know, a few 100,000 years of human civilization, when, you know, if you were having sex, you know, with a male partner, the chances were, you know, and you were young, the chances were you would get pregnant unless one of you had an infertility issue. So the possibility to actually think about whether to become a parent is very new for women. And also, you know, we're not living in Jane Austen times. You know, we do have the ability to support ourselves. You know, we have jobs, you know. Not everyone has careers. I love this idea that all women without children are career women. No, most of them have jobs rather than these kind of mythical careers. But, you know, I think we need to have some awareness that perhaps the psychological and psychosocial kind of framing of how to think through this issue is completely new. And actually, we need to encourage young women. We need to kind of give them the tools and the social permission to have these conversations around ambivalence. You know, rather than shutting them down so that each woman feels that she's on her own with those thoughts.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, as you were talking, two things were occurring to me. One was that it's just this entirely new discovery of what it is to be a woman now, because women just didn't have these types of freedoms for centuries. So, you know, with economic freedom comes the ability to be single, and then comes the ability to choose whether to be a mother or not. So when we're stuck in our own individual dilemma and head about this, I mean, I will be very frank that, you know, I've thought terrible things about myself for not choosing to be a mother. You know, I thought, I'm not a woman, I'm not going to experience love, I'm not going to experience, you know, the greatest experience that life has to offer. Because guess what? That's what they're saying all the time.
That's what they keep peddling,
Why would you not think that about yourself? I mean, unless you're made of plastic, you would absorb those thoughts and you would think that you're missing out, you know? So I think it would almost be not human to not go through that doubting process, and also kind of a self-loathing process to get out of, because you would be, I don't know, fearful. I've had a lot of fear that I made a wrong turn in life somewhere. That kind of thought
Mm.
But then when you sort of look at the bigger societal picture and you see yourself in context, you realize, wow, you know, we have a lot of choices and possibilities that women never had before, and, you know, good for us for seizing them. And why is this necessarily true that this is the best experience or the only wonderful experience that life has to offer?
And I think that is like, that question is the key question. I think it would be wonderful to empower younger women to be allowed to think, you know, to kind of to look through it and go, okay, if we take away the brainwashing and we take away the pronatalism and we take away everything else, is this, you know, is this the only way for me to live my life? Is this right for me? Is this the most meaningful thing I can do? Is meaning really that important? You know, lots and lots of things, because, you know, we are, I think, you know, I see so many articles now about meaning and happiness and things like that, and I think that too often could do with a little bit of, you know, poking and deconstruction. But the idea that, you know, that motherhood is the only meaningful way to have a life is, I think, we only have to think of mothers that we know in our experience or that we knew growing up, or maybe even our own mothers, you know, to kind of check that against just the reality we've encountered in our own lives, to go, well, maybe not for everyone, and maybe not all the time, and maybe not for me. And even if it was something you really clearly wanted, which I didn't at first, but once I did, I really did, you know, I have found another way to have a meaningful life. And I think there are going to be infinite ways to find those meaningful lives, you know, for as long as our civilization, you know, holds up. But
one thing that's been interesting for me with that is that as I've gotten older, into my 40s, I started having friends who are in their 60s.
Yeah.
And what I find really interesting about becoming close friends with those people is that they may have had children or not, but they basically have the same questions I do. So, you know, having children is a meaningful experience, but it's not the end of the road. I mean, those people also continue to ask their questions about meaning and purpose and fun and what am I doing with my life and where's my man, and, you know, like all of that stuff. I mean, it really is remarkably similar. So there's something about that was like, well, you know, we're human beings and we just keep doing things, and, you know, maybe having a child was part of the life and maybe it wasn't, but it's not like your life is just over. Like, so I crossed that off, and now my life is totally cool for the rest. You know, I have no more questions because I had a child. Of course not.
Yeah.
So
maybe one is a bit too busy to, you know, to really think about those questions. You know, your life is, you know, completely fully occupied in a way that, you know, it's quite extraordinary. And sometimes I think one of the really big differences, you know, when you look over the fence, if you have children or if you don't, is that I see that having a child means you, for women, especially when they're very young, is they really have absolutely no time to think about themselves or think about, you know, the kind of stuff we're talking about, meaning, existence, purpose. I mean, they can't even go to the bathroom by themselves. And then, you know, and then sometimes the experience, particularly for single childless women, you know, maybe in the early years and maybe at certain points throughout, you know, long-term singleness, is sometimes too much time on your own, too much time to be introspective, too much time to think about those kinds of questions. And I think there can be a fantasy that, you know, being a mum must be great because you don't have to deal with this. And then for mums looking at us, they imagine sort of their life, but maybe with more time and cleaner furniture. But actually, you know, they both ways of being a woman, you know, come with really, really kind of chunky challenges. You know, there isn't a kind of, well, this is better. It's, you know, I hate that. I hate that idea that the divide, the perceived divide that also that, you know, the media does really love, but, you know, between us as women, when in actual fact, I think it's just between the experience that we're living in that 20-year period. Because you talk about people in their 60s and then, you know, it's easier to connect with them again.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I I think that that's really true. And one thing I wanted to note too is that, well, okay, I'm preparing for Quirky Alone Day, which is the holiday that's coming up. So I was looking at research about how being single has become more acceptable in society. And one of the stats that I found was that millennials, people who are younger than us, a much higher percentage of them think that marriage and children don't have to be everyone's priorities. So it does. I mean, I wonder what you think. Do you think that shift already is happening for people who are 18 to 34, or do you think that the pressure is as high?
Well, something I've noticed is that the millennials, interesting enough, they, if I had been able to have children, that's, my children would be millennials. So they'd be kind of in their early 20s now. So, but I do have nephews and nieces and godchildren and around that age. And something I have noticed is that, compared to me, particularly the young women that I know are dating much less, having many, not really getting into sort of heavy, serious relationship with boyfriends in their teens. A lot of them are single in their early 20s, in a way that I just don't remember that from my experience around that time. Just everybody seemed to be in relationships or trying to be in one, and the angst around that, I'm not seeing that in them.
Right.
So that's a very, very obviously a very personal view of a particular group of young women, but it does seem very, very different to my experience when I was a teenager and I was in my early 20s. When if you didn't have a boyfriend, and it wasn't called dating then, you were going out with someone. There was no dating culture in the UK. You were either going out with someone or you weren't. There was no dating. If you were single, it was odd.
Yeah.
You were trying to find a boyfriend.
Right. Yeah, and even, I started writing about Quirky Alone in 2000,
Yeah.
and it was much more like that in 2000, when there were only a few television shows with single people on them. It was, Seinfeld and Friends, and then Ally McBeal on Sex and the City. And now there are so many, I think that there are reflections of single people and different ways of life much more around us, and technology has changed a lot. So I wonder, and more celebrities have come out about being childless too, with the childless questions. So I wonder if it will be a lot more acceptable and less angst-ridden for women as they get older, or we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think your work is really important, and we're recording this just a couple of weeks before Valentine's Day, which you have brilliantly rebranded Quirky Alone Day, and that's been going, did you say since 2003, something like that?
Yeah.
I mean, and that there are parties all over the world for it. It's like a little sort of Quirky Alone pop-up day, which I really love. And you're planning something in Oakland, San Francisco on that day this year. Yeah?
Yeah. This year, the celebration in Oakland will be a workshop where people will come together, and I'm going to lead a workshop about reducing negative self-talk, sort of stuff we've been talking about, that people have around being single, and embracing that existence, and also getting clear about what it is that you really want in your life. So having support of other people who identify as Quirky Alone, and having fun, meeting others, just like Gateway Women gives you the chance to meet other people who are in your boat. Quirky Alone is like that too.
So what is a Quirky Alone? What's different between a Quirky Alone and a single woman?
So a Quirky Alone is someone who can enjoy being single, or has the aspiration to enjoy being single, and wants to be in a relationship but really doesn't want to settle. So, that describes the person. And then there's a philosophy that comes out of that, which is really about finding happiness within yourself, whether you're single or in a relationship, which in that sort of cosmology would be Quirky Together. So, the Quirky Together part is about approaching relationship with the sense of freedom to be fully yourself and not have to collapse into norms about how it's supposed to be.
That's great, and that feels really important. And I'm thinking of my work as a trainee psychotherapist, and working with clients, and issues around, as you say, who am I in a relationship, are so essential to our sense of who we are, and I've been single now for coming on for 6 years, and that's been a really life-changing experience for me. I mean, I was in relationships from the age of 15 to the age of 45. The longest gap I had in that period was about 8 months, and I thought it was a tragedy. I really struggled, and I'm kind of, I'm a bit embarrassed how much I struggled, but it was not something I had the tools to know how to be. Basically, I had the tools for being in a relationship with other people. I didn't have the tools for being in a relationship with myself. And over the 6 years, I have developed the tools for being in relationship with myself, and I'm actually really enjoying it. It took me a few years to get through it, to get to that point where I really enjoy being by myself. And I saw this kind of, sort of Pinterest kind of quote the other day, and it said, someone put something like, I'm in a really good relationship with myself. It's been a few years now. I think I might be the one, which really made me laugh, because I really identify with that. And to imagine going into relationship, knowing that I have this, that that I'm really happy being by myself, just, it does take a lot of pressure off the idea of what I might be expecting to get from a relationship.
Yeah, there's the quirky together thing is something that people interpret in different ways. And one person was teaching sociology, and they share my book Quirky Alone in the class as an example of deviance, and how a person who
I knew I liked you.
Deviance, yes. No, and how deviance could move society forward, basically. So he wanted to send me one of his students' definitions of quirky together, which he thought was really great, and I agreed, was that a quirky together is two people who want to be together as opposed to need to be together. So, I thought that, I mean, we are human beings. We have dependencies. When you are in a relationship, you have needs. But at a fundamental level, there are two people who have a desire to be together as opposed to I must be with someone. So I think that's a cool way of thinking about it. And when you were talking about being the one, another concept that I'm really enamored with is self-marriage. And there was just a story in Vice. And
I saw it yesterday. Yeah,
so cool, because people think, self-marriage seems like a wacky concept to most people and really bizarre, but I've warmed up to it because I started writing about it in the Quirky Alone book that was published in 2004, and I interviewed 2 women who married themselves, and I thought it was great, but not something for me. And then when I turned 40, it suddenly surged in me that this is what I needed to do to celebrate my 40th birthday. And I did it in a very private way. I didn't do it with a big white wedding dress and a big event, because that's just not how I am. But I did it with friends, and it was incredibly meaningful to go through a ritual and make vows to myself and have this symbol. And so I feel like a great advocate of this, even though I feel like people think I'm pretty weird, or I sort of battle with that feeling, but I don't care, because I just think that it makes so much sense, and that 50 years from now, I hope that everybody gets married to themselves as a prerequisite before marriage to another. So, yeah. So
I liked that in that article in Vice, it was also a follow-up, which I thought was really interesting, because the news stories are often about, gosh, isn't this kind of weird and wacky? But what was lovely about that piece was the sense of following up on those women and saying, well, kind of how has that changed things for you, and it was that sense that came across in the article of sort of making a conscious commitment to really kind of value and honour yourself. That seemed to be really important to those women, and it sounds like that the ritualistic nature of it kind of gives you permission, in a way, to take yourself seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. absolutely. And there's just something about ritual that seals the deal and, you know, makes it important. And you have this reference point to come back to. And I really, quite literally, having the ring, and I had an engagement necklace, the objects become imbued with all this meaning. And when I put them on, I feel the power of them.
Totally.
So it's so good that a woman could have that as opposed to the ring only being a symbol of a commitment to another. You know, I just think it's so incredibly great. And it doesn't mean that you couldn't have a ring with a commitment to another, but you could have both, you know.
Yeah, I remember one woman in the article said, you know, she would be open to the idea of getting married. It's not that, you know, I'd have to divorce myself or anything in order to do it, which is a really, and I love what you say about rituals seal the deal, because I use a lot of ritual in my work, sort of in my workshops and stuff like that, because I really kind of come to it, understood that for women, you know, all of the ritual aspects of life, the ones that are left in our culture, are all around partnership, and having children. And that if you're not involved in those things, there's a sense there aren't really that many kind of landmarks, you know, and we don't have a celebration, you know, for the beginning of the menopause or anything like that, which it would be quite difficult to do because it's a bit of a moving target anyway, you know, when that actually, you know, starts or finishes. But I find, you know, working with ritual really, really powerful. And there's one ritual I do, which is a ritual around grieving. And the women who've gone through that ritual with me, we usually do it in a group. There's a sense that there's a before and an after. It sort of puts a line down, you know, and it has a really, as you say, it has a really powerful effect. You know, how I felt before that day and how I feel now. Because childlessness is one of those things that it's not always like, this is the day I became childless. Because maybe it's something that you came to realize over a period of years, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, it calls to mind some words that I think about a lot are taking up space and like how we could take up space in our society and for ourselves. And yeah, I love going to my friends' weddings, but there is a sense that if you don't have that, like, well, where is this celebration of me in my life? And am I less important or less evolved? And, you know, it's not a competition about who's more important, but it's the structure, it's the current structure of our society and conversation like this, that you and I are daring to ask this question of, should there be a celebration for a woman coming into her own, you know, as a woman, whatever her choice is, it breaks open the idea that could exist.
Yes.
Like, why couldn't it exist?
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly. Why couldn't it? And, you know, the current sort of social structure, no matter how much it may not look like this on the surface, you know, once you kind of strip away the modern gloss, is about women not taking up space. You know, so unless it is in a socially sanctioned way as a partner or as a mother, things like that. So it's, we're deviants are us. I love that. So tell me a little bit more about your workshop. Is it actually going to be on the 14th on Valentine's/Quirky Alone Day? So will it be mostly women? Will it be mixed?
So far in the signups, it's a mix of men and women. You know, the Quirky Alone community is mostly women. I've just done another survey where I got some stats.
Oh, really? Do you want to tell me a bit about that? Because I mean, I did that. I'd love to know what the results were.
It's really, really interesting. I might even pull it up as I talk to you, because I'm in the process of, you know, making infographics and stuff to release to the world. But basically, the gender breakdown was confirmed, same as when I did a survey in 2005, that it's 85% women. So, you know, Quirky Alone has always really appealed to women because we deal with all of this bullshit, basically.
Yes.
Something to lift us up. And, you know, most people, I thought another interesting statistic was that most people did when given the choice between being single or being in a quirky together relationship, they would prefer to be in a quirky together relationship. That was something like 80%.
Okay.
So quirky together meaning a relationship where you don't lose yourself. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Vast majority thought being quirky alone was a positive thing in their lives. So it wasn't at all the sense that it was bad. It was, you know, really grateful that they were that way, that they, you know, enjoyed their own company and their freedom and the time to do things they wanted, and that sense of coming into a relationship more fully. And in terms of, I want to pull up the statistics about motherhood. Most do not have children.
Yeah.
Some, I think it was about 8% have children, and then a few more percentages, like 3%, were co-parenting a partner's child. And then, let's see, I'm going to pull it up for the rest so I can remember. And truly global, from all over the world.
Okay.
You know, that's been such a, and age-wise, again, across the board, from teenagers to people in their upper 60s. You know, that's always been really, really interesting. Because when I started writing about this, I was in my 20s and was always so surprised that people of every age group really resonated with being quirky alone.
That's lovely. I didn't know that about the Quirky Alone movement. That's really encouraging, because I'm a late comer to being quirky alone, and I love it.
You're a born again quirky alone. In the book, I talk about the womb quirky alone. I'm a womb quirky alone. I basically came out of the womb this way. And I mean, I don't know all of your life story, but I think that we've had a lot of similar experiences. And what I think is just interesting is that you could have a similar set of experiences or background and turn out to be a born-again quirky alone or a womb quirky alone. You know, like you came to this in your 40s. I was always this way. But there's some sort of like kernel of when your quirky aloneness was going to be expressed. So I think
I think I've always been quite quirky, you know. And most of my friends are very similar. And there's a sense that, you know, most of them are artists or slightly deviants in some way, like that, you know, and there's that sense that, you know, artists and writers, and I include people of all kinds of things in that word, artists, have always had a slight outsider status, because it's one of the things that gives us the ability to see things maybe differently to others. So I'm wondering, you know, how many in the Quirky Alone movement are kind of creatives. Probably, you know, maybe it's not a stat that you've got, but, you know, do you have Quirky Alone, you know, people who are sort of, you know, bankers and real estate agents, or?
There are some, yeah. I did ask about people's occupations in this survey, and it's a pretty broad mix. There are a lot of people who are in the helping or, you know, somehow a creative occupation, or students. Yeah. But then there are also your software engineers, you know, but that would be another kind of quirky area that, you know, the sciences, like, you know, computer science kind of stuff. And I think that, you know, likely up in the corporate upper echelons, it's less prevalent or more repressed, because, you know, to succeed in those worlds, I think you really need to be married in a certain way, or you just see, like, when people are in those kind of business high level things, being married is sort of much more, almost seems like a requirement in a certain way.
Yeah, certainly in politics and things like that. I mean, looking at the kind of stuff that got thrown at, you know, Julia Gillard in Australia for being, you know, single and child free. You know, it was a big political target for the opposition, of her kind of weirdness and her unfitness to be in charge of the country because of it. And we've had lots of that going on in the UK with various politicians as well, and women starting to kind of, you know, politicians starting to come out and talk about it as well, which is great. You know, talk about that it's, you know, not always a choice, but it's not always a disaster either. which I think is definitely a new narrative that's starting to come up. And depending on which newspaper you read, it's either a sign of us developing as a culture, or it's the end of the world. It depends which one you pick up on the newsstands. But I know you've got a busy day to go ahead, and I didn't want to leave without talking about Tango.
Yeah.
We got to talk about Tango.
Tango and the Tangasm.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the Tangasm as well.
Let's not hold back.
Yeah.
Since we are deviants, we might as well use the word.
There is a beautiful picture of you on your website, or maybe it's on something to do with the Buenos Aires Quirky Alone Tango thing, and it just says an arrow. It says, "This is a Tangasm," and it's a picture of your face and you're dancing, but there's such a look of bliss, but it's like really embodied bliss. Such a lovely photo, and I have to say it is a great advertisement. I think I want what she's having. So tell me about, you got a tango trip coming up, haven't you, later this year?
I do, yes. I bring groups of single women to Buenos Aires to learn about tango as a metaphor for life and relationship, and to discover your sensuality, which I think is a really important piece for single women. That just because you're single doesn't mean you don't want to have pleasure or hugs or be touched. And tango is this really great way to explore all of that within a container that is pretty safe.
Wow.
So, it's a great way. Yeah, so I discovered tango about 5 years ago when I was doing that solo travel, and it really changed my life forever. And I discovered in the dance of tango a way to see myself and heal a lot of the things from my life.
Wow.
And yeah, no, it really has been, I'm writing this memoir called Wet is the title at the moment, and tango is a big piece of it, and it's a lot about the journey of my own healing from sexual abuse issues, and really not only sexual abuse, but a lot of the wounds that we have as women, about not taking up space. And in tango, I see this really phenomenal way that we can learn how to take up space and be bigger, because it's a dance that's about learning how to be proud and find your proud posture, to strut and to be a woman in a way that is very powerful. But, at the same time as connect to a partner and do it from a place of equality and being centered in yourself. So basically, what I discovered in tango was this really perfect metaphor for quirky alone and quirky together, because to dance the dance, you need to be centered in yourself and your own axis. And so we can be really connected in this embrace, but if you go away, I'm still standing up. And everything works better in the dance when each partner has their own balance. But at the same time, this embrace between the two people is equally important. So the two things that are super important are self-connection through your axis and your balance in yourself, and connection to the other through the embrace. So that's sort of the platonic ideal of quirky together. That you could someone stay connected to yourself and be with someone else. And so, women come with me for this week in Buenos Aires, and some of them continue to dance tango when they go home, and some of them don't. But either way, you get something really powerful for your life with what you learn through the lessons and the workshops that are in Buenos Aires. And also, it's like a really authentic experience, because I'm creating something for my own life with like all the best teachers and coolest places, and it's really the love of my life, tango in Buenos Aires. So I share it with you. Yeah.
And that, I mean, I just love that, because that's so, that's so beautiful that you found something that you're really passionate about, and you're creating a way to share it with other women so that they can find their way through that experience and see what it brings to them. And I feel that that's something very similar about what we do. I don't feel I'm some kind of guru who's got all the answers about how to live a meaningful life as a childless woman, but I just know that I'm living it, and what I do know, and I'm always on the cutting edge of what I don't know, but what I do know, I'm sharing. But I'm also in that place of, this is an experiment, women may have lived our kinds of lives before, but they haven't had the opportunity to talk about them and share them because of, global communications in the way that you and I have. And also, although they're still taboo, we are not being pelted with things in the street. We are not being arrested. The suffragettes have made, started, led the way for us. We can actually talk about these things. It's embarrassing. It's difficult for people. It's confronting. But for a start, it's legal. I think of all those women around the world in cultures where, it's illegal to be open about being a woman. It's, you can't even drive, you can't even vote. And, where to be childless or to be single is, so shaming. It devastates your life, and I hope that one day it's going to be possible, to take the Gateway Women work, out of developed countries and into some of the developing countries and support some of the women there. But me and the cat, we might have to grow the business just a little bit more before that's possible. But that's I think these conversations, one of the reasons I wanted to record them and put them out there is that they could plant seeds in other women's minds that could lead to empowerment in their lives and their cultures and their communities. Because if I could have watched this video 10 years ago, it could have really changed my life. Being
Absolutely.
open about that stuff. Yeah.
I think that we have almost an obligation to recognize how much power and freedom that we have and to use it more, because like I was saying before about there's the individual experience and the self-doubt that comes up. But when you sort of go out and see the big picture, you do see that we have a remarkable amount of possibility today. And, and even the technology that has allowed us to connect, you and me, like, I feel such a connection with you that I'm in the US, I've had this movement and group of people, and you've been in UK with your movement. And wow, it makes me feel more powerful to connect with you and see that we're part of something larger.
Yeah.
And I love the global vision. I mean, along the way with Quirky Alone Day, there have been women, there's been Quirky Alone Day parties in India, like
fantastic.
What a fabulous thing. And some woman in her 20s in India contacts me and tells me that she's having something, so there are little flowers that pop up. And I want to grow. I love that vision of growing my business as well. And we could do Quirky Alone Gateway Women World Tour or something.
Yeah, well, that's a beautiful note to end on. And I definitely want to come down to Buenos Aires and dance the tango with you. Not this one. It's in April the 2nd to the 9th this year, 2016. And you still have some places left. And I guess if anyone's watching who can go, gosh, go. I think it's going to be amazing. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me this morning. It's been, as always, an absolute delight to talk to you. And I look forward to speaking with you in person this summer when I come to California.
I can't wait to meet you in person, Jody.
And my cat didn't make an appearance, you see, because I said she would. Because I said she would.
You took up so much space, that's all. You became so big that you had to take up the screen.
Oh, that's beautiful. You should talk professionally, Have you thought about that? Brilliant. All right, honey. So thank you so much, and I'll see you again soon.
Okay, see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.